Hey everyone, welcome to Grafton Custom Woodworking. In this build, we have a client that reached out to us and said that they want a cornice. Basically, what that is it is a cover for your blinds or your shelves. So that way, it kind of goes around your blind curtain rods, and so that way you don't see your regular curtain rods. And so they really like the rustic look. So we're going to go with pine with the knots and different kind of figures and stuff like that to try to build that for them. So let's get started. So this is the board that I found. It's got a lot of really good knots in it and a couple of good figures to it. So I really like it. And basically what we're going to do is they want to take this rope here and put it down at the bottom. And then they want to take this edging here, the crown molding, and then kind of angle it at the top. To get started with this, with some of these knots, you see they got some figures, so we'll have to put some super glue in those and let it dry, so that way these knots don't pop out later on down the road, and to kind of stabilize them a little bit. So what we need to do is make sure that the knots are not on the back side too. If they are on the back side, what we'll do is we'll put some tape over one side and then put glue on the other, so that way the glue doesn't leak out all over on my table. All we really need to do is just take some blue tape and tape over those knots, make sure it gets good seal down on them. We'll do that for all these knots, and then we'll flip it over and put some super glue in it. All I'm doing is taking some CA glue thin, so that way it's a little liquidy, and just kind of pouring it into those cracks. That way it seeps in and really sets good and holds those knots. Now that the CA glue is kind of seeped into these knots and dried up, I'm taking my sander and I'm going to, just kind of smooth it down, clean it up a little bit, just to get it flush. Now that I got the board all sanded down smooth, I'm going to take it over here to the miter saw. Got a 45 on it, and I will cut the ends to a 45. Already got this one done. And so from this end to here, it needs to be 112. And so I will mark it 112 and draw a straight line to make sure I get that right cut. So now that I got the two ends cut on the board, I've got my other pieces that will mount right like that. And this part will bolt to the wall. So what I did is I got these two pieces, and I want to make sure they are exact same size. So I have flush them up at the very top, make sure they are exactly the same height, make sure they're flush here. But if you look, I did cut that back one just a little hair longer so I could clean it up. So I just need to trim it just so that way both of these will be the exact same size. Now I got those end pieces, and so I'm just putting a dry fit, just clamping it down, get my clamps ready. I did put a piece of blue tape on there, and so that way when I fold it up, it tightens it up, and everything is looking like it's coming together really, really good. So now I'm going to take these clamps off, put some glue in here, and then clamp it back up. Because this is a miter joint and it's not really that strong with these grains, I did put a very light coat of glue on there. I'll kind of let it soak into the grains, and then I'll put another coat of glue before I seal it up, and that will help to grab a little bit better. So once I pull these together, I'm going to take a straw, I cut an angle, and I'm going to go up in here and just slide it, and it will collect all that glue in the corners. And so I can slide it over. It'll just suck that glue right up in that corner, so then I can clean it up. Once we took the clamps out of it, you can see this is actually a very good seam right there. So that turned out really, really good. We'll just have to sand it down, get some of this glue that kind of came out, just sand that little glue out right there, and that will be really good. What I'm going to do is where we're putting the molding, I'll put a little pin nail or a brad nail up here, and then one here, and then a few little pin nails in here just to kind of help hold that. Here you can see I put a brad nail here, and then a pin nail, pin nail, pin nail, pin nail, and a brad nail. and we'll fill all these in. We'll take some fine sawdust and some glue and patch these up. And those pin nails, because they're a little bit smaller, they'll be a lot easier to patch up. And then the brad nails will be covered up. Brad nails will hold a little bit stronger, so that's the reason I wanted to put those on the ends. In order to get the crown molding part, I got these, and so basically this is the bottom part, and it will need to go up. So it will have to sit in here. Make sure this is lined up on the back there. Miter saw will be straight up and down, and we will put a 45 here. And so then we will have to cut this straight like that. So once we made the cut, you see this is here. This will go on one side, this will go on the other. So we'll take this, with this part being the bottom. So this is the top of the edge, and this will line up right on the corner. And so it'll go just like that. Make that cut. So now what I did is I'm laying it, this is gonna be the top, so that way I can take my piece here and reference. I did draw a line, that's gonna be my glue line, and then I can put this on here, and then we can pin nail it and then walk it all the way through. And my buddy TJ with Duran Woodworking come over here to help me. So what I did is I put a clamp on here, lined it up on the edge, and then we put a few pin nails in to hold it in place and put some glue on it. And so now we'll do the same. We'll line it up here and do the same on this one. When putting the molding, we found that if you use a little piece of cutoff and put it in the groove, and you put a clamp on there and it pulls it right in, and you spread it out. So that's actually how I'm holding it down, so that way I can get it. It actually works very well. To get this rope piece, we're going to kind of offset it from the edge. And so once we put it on there, that's how far we're going to go. And we'll put a couple of pin nails, and then what we'll have to do is we'll line this piece up and then go off the same and mark it all the way down. A couple things I'm going to do is, just once I kind of get this edge here, I'm going to clamp this down just to kind of hold it in place, so that way we can get our mark. Got it all put together. And so some of the places where there's like a little glue squeeze out, got a little bit. I'll just take my chisel and just slowly just kind of creep up on it. Just kind of clean some of that up. It's all put together and looking good. But one thing I do want to point out is right here where this corner is, we tried to meet it up as best as possible with the little grooves and stuff like that, but you got a little bit of edges and stuff. So basically just, I want to take some sandpaper and just round it off and try to blend it all in. You can see on this one here how those corners, and it just kind of smooths around, and the little cut here. So that's what we need to do. Just kind of smooth it out and kind of blend it all in. Now you can see how that one blended in very nicely. Thing I do want to point out is this rope piece was not long enough. It came with two pieces, so it was not long enough to go all the way down. So I did have to splice it. And so right here, what I did is I cut it on a 45, and you got one that's under, and then this one will lay on top of it. If you get a good enough seam and blend it in, you can see right here where you can see kind of where it blended in. But if you start sanding it down and smooth it down, you will never see that. I mean, I can't even find it now. I don't even know where it's at. So it blends in really, really good. You'll never see it. This board, I did put some CA glue in the knots to seal those, but this is the stabilizer that will go on the back of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the edge right here, and then we will mark it. It's a little bit longer, so we'll mark it where we need to cut it, and then it will bolt on the other side on the top over here. So I made my marks every so often where I want it on this board. And so I will put pocket holes, put it in here and put the pocket holes on there. So that way the pocket holes will go here. This will be the top part, and this will be the bottom. And then I will go ahead and put 2 pocket holes here also. So this will secure to the edge. Now that it's all built, I'm going to use some pre-stain because this is pine. And Now that we're done with the pre-stain, the client wants Jacobine. And so with this small can, I just like dipping it in a paintbrush in here, and then we'll just kind of wipe it on and smear it, and then let it get all up in those grains really good. So for the rope part, that's where the brush will come in really good and handy. So you can actually just get a little bit on the brush and then just kind of plop it on there. And then once you kind of get it on there, let it sit, but you want to kind of get all up in the little cracks and everything, but be a little rough with it. And so that way you can see how you got some light and some dark, and that really will make the rope look. So that way, you know, you want it some thin and some dark. So get a little rough with it, make it a little heavy on a couple parts of it. Once I completely put the stain on it, I came back with a rag and just kind of wiped off all the excess. I let it sit on there for a little while. So it looks good. I really like how some of this rope in certain spots, you can see it kind of looks like it's weathered. But that's it. I'm going to let it dry overnight and come back and see if there's any puddles of it where it kind of seeps through a little bit, and kind of wipe it down. And then I'm going to put a finish on it, or sealer. For the finish, I'm using this brushing lacquer. And so the reason I chose it is because it'd be easier to kind of get into some of these grooves all up in these corners and everything like that. So I can just kind of take my brush and get a little bit on the brush, and then I'll just kind of drop it in there a little bit, and then I'll push it all up in those corners. And then I can make sure I get it all up in those grooves and everything like that. That way I can kind of manage it. Even though this is really not going to be touched, I still like to go over it, kind of buff it out with some steel wool, just to kind of smooth it down. But one thing good about this brushing lacquer is it really doesn't leave brush marks. It smooths down pretty good, but every once in a while you'll get little nibs, little dusties and stuff like that you just kind of smooth down a little bit, and I like that. Basically all I do with this steel wool is I just kind of ball it up, and I'll just slightly just rub over it with the grain and just kind of smooth out some of those fuzzies. And once you kind of do that, it makes it super smooth. And I'll do that over everything. You know, getting up in these little cracks and corners and stuff like that will really help the look. Once I'm done with the steel wool, I come back with a microfiber towel and just kind of wipe it down, buff it out real good. And that will help remove some of that dust. But you can see how that steel wool will take off some of the plasticky looking parts of it and bring it back to where it looks like real wood, but it still keeps that good gloss finish and protecting. So I was finally able to deliver this cornice to the customer and hang it up for them, and they were extremely excited. They loved it. It looks really, really good with the rest of the decor in their house and everything like that. So this turned out really good, and I'm really proud of it. I hope you learned something and kind of took some tips and tricks from what I did. Please don't forget to subscribe and like, because it helps me a lot. And until the next time, we'll see you later.